Hey there, welcome to this week's episode of my weekly live stream and soon to be podcast discussing all things play therapy to help the next generation of play therapists learn how to become amazing and effective play therapists to help children, adolescents, and families change. So, this week, what I want to talk about is looking at congruence and why congruence matters in the play therapy process from a neuroscience and attachment lens. I love looking at the play therapy process using a neuroscience and attachment lens. I'm kind of a firm believer that if you look at pretty much most of the play therapy models, you can kind of see how a neuroscience and attachment lens would fit that, understanding that therapeutic relationship and the change process. If you look at it from an attachment lens, you could kind of see how that research information really can help you in the playroom. And so that is what we are talking about today. Why does congruence matter in the playroom? And looking at that congruence from a neuroscience and attachment lens using the work of Daniel Siegel in his book Mindsight. Daniel Siegel coined the term resonance circuits. And so I want to talk about those today just a little bit in terms of how that information can help you as you're learning how to use play therapy and how to access that therapeutic sense, that therapeutic use of self in the playroom. All righty, so let's get started. I would love to see who's here today. For those of you joining me live, I would love to know who's here. Post your name in the comments, where you're from, what population you work with, what's your favorite play therapy modality, what treatment or play therapy model are you using? My default mode is child-centered play therapy. That's how I was trained. And I kind of look at congruence in many ways from that from that child-centered play therapy model, especially when working with younger kids. And congruence is really translatable to most, I would say most, if not all, of the play therapy models, because it has everything to do with your use of self in the playroom and how you are helping your clients get grounded in the play therapy process using that therapeutic relationship in the playroom. So let's see who's here. Post your name in the comments, where you're from, what population you work with, what play therapy model you're using, and let's get started. So I'm Kathy Spooner. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapist supervisor here in the United States with over 30 years experience in the child and adolescent mental health field. I first got introduced to play therapy back in the 1980s when I was a special education teacher. The school psychologist and I facilitated a play therapy group with my class of, I think at the time I had 10 children, elementary age, and we did play therapy groups using fairy tales based on the work of Bruno Bettelheim from his book, The Uses of Enchantment. So from there, I kind of knew that teaching wasn't really what I wanted to do to help children. I really wanted to do this therapy thing I was learning about. So that began my journey into the play therapy profession. So first and foremost, what is congruence and why does it matter? So I'm going to read a definition to you of congruence. These are from online dictionaries. Congruence is the congruence of two systems: agreement, harmony, conformity, or correspondence. the quality or state of agreeing or corresponding. From a play therapy standpoint, really we're looking at congruence as being able to align our internal experiences with our external expression of those experiences to essentially create that sense of unconditional positive regard and empathy for my client in the playroom, really to anchor my client in that change process within that safe and secure space to facilitate the healing. And so my clients can access those therapeutic powers of play. One of the things that we've learned from affective neuroscience, as well as the work of Stephen Porges, is that we know children cannot access their play circuitry until they feel safe, because they need to activate their social engagement circuits in order to access those play circuits. And in order to access those social engagement circuits, they need to deactivate their threat circuitry. So being able to create that safe and secure space in the playroom using the therapeutic use of self to anchor that client in the change process is a really critical skill in the play therapy skill development process. It's actually one of the core competencies of play therapy based on the Association for Play Therapy here in the United States. They have developed some core competencies that a play therapist needs to develop in order to be effective. Part of that is to know how to develop a strong therapeutic relationship. The other part of that is really grounding your work in a theoretical model. That's important too. So if you have that balance of your theoretical model plus your therapeutic use of self, accessing those therapeutic powers of play, then that really is kind of all of the ingredients needed to effectively use play therapy. And your therapeutic use of self, how you show up in the playroom, is going to be rooted in your theoretical model. So how I show up in the playroom as a child-centered play therapist is going to look a little different than if I were an Adlerian play therapist, or if I were a cognitive behavioral therapist. There will be some similarities because that therapeutic relationship is needed in all of the theoretical models, but the way in which I show up, like my tracking, is going to look much different than it will in a different theoretical model. And in child-centered play therapy, a lot of that tracking, a lot of that use of self in the playroom space is what is a core component of that change process. So this idea of congruence and therapeutic use of self is a really important part of the play therapy process. In fact, we do talk about this. I have an online play therapy consultation program. So in that consultation program, we have online group meetings, and there are courses in there, and I give support. I will also, the people in the Play Therapy Academy have the option to be able to schedule some individual time as well. And between the individual time and the group time, one of the things that we work on a lot is, one, what theory model are you using and how are you using are you using it effectively? But the other is, how are you showing up? How are you accessing congruence authentically and using that to create that safe space? And in child-centered play therapy, I had this conversation with one of the people that I work with. We had this conversation last night, actually, really about a lot of what the new play therapists worry about is am I conveying unconditional positive regard? Because they really want to make a difference. I mean, that I did. That's why I do it. I want to make a difference. This is, it's a hard job. We hold hard stories. We hold hard things. It's exhausting to show up with a full therapeutic use of self, session after session after session. So we need that support first and foremost, but that's why we do it. We want to make a difference. And in the beginning, people, there's a concern. Am I showing up? Am I conveying unconditional positive regard? Am I showing my client that I care about them? And am I using my play therapy model correctly? Am I making a difference? Is this even working? And part of that has to do with how you're showing up. Are you able to access congruence? So for example, if internally you're experiencing a lot of worry, like, oh, are my clients knowing that I care? Are they, am I doing this right? Did I track that right? Am I making a difference? Are my clients going to find out that, are my clients going to find out that I'm a big fraud and I don't know what I'm doing? If you're experiencing all of that internally, then it's going to make it challenging to externally express unconditional positive regard and empathy, as well as do some of that clinical decision making in the moment about, oh, what am I doing? Am I applying these models? I mean, am I applying this model accurately? And so first and foremost, this is part of the process, is learning how to settle into your managing your own internal responses while you're implementing a play therapy model. And that takes a lot of support. I remember trying to find play therapy back in the 1990s, not finding it anywhere. And finally, after years, because this is way before the internet took off, years just trying to find somebody to help me learn how to do this play therapy thing that I knew was a thing because I experienced it when I was a teacher. Finally, finding a supervisor who was a registered play therapist supervisor and having her help me learn how to do it, plus some other friends along the way who were a little further along in their development than me, that was such a game changer. My ability to learn the skills once I got that support was enormous. My confidence grew. I noticed that too with the people that I supervise, especially in Play Therapy Academy, really seeing that growth and development take place, that confidence take place. So I want to read a quote from Dr. Gary Landreth from his book, Play Therapy, The Art of Relationship, because I really do think that this kind of really shows what we're going for and what we're kind of talking about here. And he says, acceptance grows out of a genuine and sincere interest in children, a sensitivity to their rights, and a belief that they can assume responsibility for themselves. Children who experience such an atmosphere of acceptance in the playroom learn that they can depend on others for support while developing their own sense of adequacy and independence. Acceptance is communicated through the therapist's patience and willingness to trust the process. And a lot of that is really grounded in child-centered play therapy. And it's still, I think, applicable across a lot of different models. But that idea of that therapeutic use of self and the ability to establish a sense of congruence internally also means that you believe that children have that innate drive, that innate ability, that innate desire to move towards healing and wholeness given the free and protected space. And that idea of trusting the process really is grounded in you're trusting the process of your theoretical play therapy model and your ability to show up authentically and congruently with that therapeutic sense of self to establish that strong therapeutic relationship that anchors your child in safety and security in the change process. So that's that therapeutic use of self and trust the process, and your ability to access congruence in that is really a kind of a game changer, I found, to facilitate the change process. Like, I remember when I moved from being anxious and insecure about my skills to just deciding, you know what, whatever. I'm just going to show up. I'm just going to fully be present in the moment. I'm just going to follow the model. It'll be what it is. My whole goal here is to just show up authentically with unconditional positive regard and acceptance along the way, and I will figure it out. And I'm telling you, once I made that shift and I was able to show up more congruently in the play therapy sessions, made all of the difference. In addition to, I kind of grounded that on top of the training and support that I was getting. And I, at some point in time, had to make that shift with that congruence. So how do resonance circuits play a part in this process? And so, because I love neuroscience and attachment within the healing space of play therapy, I love to see how it fits in this idea of play therapy and using play therapy to help children and adolescents heal and their families. Because I would say, as play therapists, we also need to show up congruently with unconditional positive regard and empathy with parents. And that's a lot of where I find the challenge to be for play therapists, is not really knowing how to do that with parents and feeling uncomfortable there. And so I like to make sure to talk about the importance of integrating parents intentionally, having a plan where you're meeting with them, not just doing the in-between phone calls and texts and emails, not just doing those 5-minute check-ins at the end, which are never 5-minute check-ins. I think it's a much more effective plan to integrate parents in, to have a plan where you're meeting with them, a whole meeting regularly. You're regularly having a whole entire meeting without the children present, at least initially, to create that safe space for parents as well. Because if you want them to make the change, then it's important to root that in that safe space as well. So let me check in. I forgot to check in. So we have a couple of people who have checked in. Michelle B. From Campbell, writing fun children's stories. Awesome. That's awesome. And hey there, Steph. What age do you stop meeting with parents? That's a great question, Steph. And I would say never. I always meet with parents when I'm working with adolescents. I mean, think about it. Adolescents need their parents as much as 2-year-olds need their parents. They need them in a different way. They still need them. I have adult grown children. They still need my husband and I. They need us in a different way, and they still need us. Parents are going to be in their children's lives, hopefully, the goal is, hopefully, for the rest of their lives, to be that support for their children. Parents of adolescents need to be different in their parenting than parents of 5-year-olds, but they still need their parents to be present. So I even when I'm meeting with adolescents, I make that a requirement. I tell parents that the requirement is, if I'm working with their child, then my expectation is that we're going to meet a minimum of at least once a month without your child present, at least in the beginning. the likelihood we'll start having some family sessions is high. That's also true with play therapy. Well, I mean, with the younger kids, because at some point, the likelihood I'm doing some family play therapy sessions is very high. But that initially, I like to have that opportunity to meet with parents and establish that sense of safety and security with parents as well. So I have to show up congruently and authentically. So that version of Kathy Spooner is going to look different than the Steph version, or different than the Michelle version. It will be dependent upon, who you are. Your therapeutic use of self has everything to do with kind of your personality and your way of providing counseling, and showing up congruent internally. How are you demonstrating that congruence with unconditional positive regard and empathy? Doesn't mean you don't set limits. We still set limits. And that was one of the conversations I had last night. Like, I'm afraid, how do I set limits? Or if I don't answer the question of my client. So this is a young client, and we're using child-centered play therapy. If I don't answer their question, then how are they going to feel like I care about them? Well, they are going to feel like you care about them because you're showing up authentically and congruently in the session with unconditional positive regard. You'll feel that internally, which will reveal itself externally based on your voice tone, your facial expression, your body language. All of those things are what communicate how you're experiencing things internally. And so getting that alignment is really important. When we're talking about resonance circuits, then we're talking about, I like to use that idea of resonance circuits because I think it's got a lot of really rich information with it. And it's a way of being that you can access through knowing how to access those resonance circuits. They're all there all the time, whether or not we know how to access them. So in my mind, might as well learn what they are and how they work so I can use them to my benefit to help my clients. And Daniel Siegel talks about, in his interpersonal neurobiology model, that he's called Mindsight. And this idea of Mindsight is how we connect mind to mind with others. And the resonance circuits play a very pivotal role in that process. And so what he talks about with the resonance circuits is really to fully resonate with another. We really have to understand and recognize what's me. So here's where that self-awareness comes in. I need to recognize what's me and what's not me. What's my client? And this is a big part of congruence, is recognizing my internal experiences and what that is, because then that's going to show up in my external expression. And so I want to read this quote from Daniel Siegel from his book, Mindsight, because I think it really does give a really good picture of what I'm talking about here. So he says in his book, Mindsight is a kind of focused attention that allows us to see the internal workings of our own minds. It helps us to be aware of our mental processes without being swept away by them, enables us to get ourselves off the autopilot of ingrained behaviors and habitual responses, and moves us beyond the reactive emotional loops we all have a tendency to be trapped in. And this was part of the conversation that I often have with people that I'm doing consultation with. We talk about this in our consultation group as well. And I do this when I meet with people individually. What's going on within you and then figuring out what those experiences are and what that is, because those can, when you get kind of caught, especially when we're new to the mental health profession and we're new to play therapy, we don't always recognize that's part of the work that we do. We begin doing it in graduate school, and it doesn't ever stop, for the record. We begin really looking at and working towards understanding those internal experiences that I'm having, beginning to understand, oh, what is that? In the old days, and it's still a term we use today, it's that counter transference and transference concept. Like, my client did something, something got activated in me. And so, what is that? Is it me, or am I picking up on what my client is doing? And then what do I do with that information? And so when you are working on developing those skills for congruence, it really is important to understand what's going on. And Daniel Siegel talks about that we even resonate physiologically one to another, meaning I can physiologically feel what you feel. And some people are much more sensitive to this than others. Like, I remember this took so long. I used to pick up on everything, especially when I was a kid. I picked up on everybody's emotions. Like, I knew things going on that, as a grown up much later, especially in graduate school, when I learned some theory models, and I remember thinking, I was right. I was right. My family was a little nuts. And that's what that is. I knew what that was. But as a kid, you're thinking, oh, I don't know those things. And, we have to learn how to manage that. What do we do with that? What is that? That's that self awareness piece. Because if we don't recognize what it is, then we can get off track in the playroom. And that'll often happen a lot in the beginning. A lot, that's how we learn. We learn from our mistakes. Your imposter syndrome will kick in. You'll think you're the worst therapist. Anybody's just about to find out. But the reality is, we all make mistakes along the way, which is why you get support, which is why I created Play Therapy Academy, to have a place where people can get support. At this point in my career, my focus is really on helping the next generation of play therapists become amazing and awesome, to make a difference in the world for children, adolescents, and families, one community at a time, right? We have 10 people maximum in Play Therapy Academy, each of the groups. So that's 10 people in 10 different communities, making a difference for children and adolescents in the community. How cool is that? You're all making a difference. And so, to be able to do that in the beginning, you need support to do that. It's a learning process, and there are places to get that support. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Play Therapy Academy at the end. So if you're interested in Play Therapy Academy and some other things I have going on, you want to make sure you kind of hang in there till the end. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, what it is, and how to learn more. The thing is, I'm going to read another quote from Daniel Siegel, because I like this one as well from his book, because it talks about these resonant circuits. And what he says is, the resonant circuitry not only allows us to feel felt and to connect with one another, but it also helps to regulate our internal state. And that's the other thing about the ability to stay congruent in sessions with your clients, is even when sometimes you have clients in the playroom that get a little rambunctious, or they're having a hard time. I've had family play therapy sessions when, it's not going so well. And therapists, we have to stay regulated. To do that, though, we need to really stay internally connected and grounded, and have that congruence, so that we can stay grounded while connected to ourselves and providing that co-regulation. We want to teach this to parents as well, so that they can do it with their children. We can have clients who are just really working things out in there and they got stuff they need to get done. Our ability to stay grounded and rooted and congruent in the session also helps with that regulation for our clients. And we know from the work of Daniel Siegel that we know that from now we know that from attachment theory, that whole co-regulation component of attachment, teaching parents how to do that. We also use it in the playroom. And yes, I also believe we need to help parents of adolescents know how to do that as well. Um, so the thing is, though, when you have poor self-awareness, it's going to be difficult to be attuned with your clients in the moment, because you may out of your own autopilot, old things that you're working on from growing up, you may kind of get off track and go in a direction that's not going to be helpful, or you may get reactive to something and you got to figure out what that is. And I'm a firm believer it's not if these things happen, it's when and what do you do with them. You can't show up in the playroom being authentic and connected and working through congruence. You can't do that perfectly 100% of the time. It's just not even possible. So it's really about making sure that we're checking in and understanding what's going on with that. And so the third thing I wanted to talk about today in terms of why does congruence matter and how can you use information that we've learned from decades of research about neuroscience and attachment to help you show up congruently and why that matters in the playroom. And one of the things that we know is that the ability to have self-awareness, what's going on within me, is a key part of using congruence, effectively accessing that therapeutic use of self. Our own self-awareness is an important part of that learning process. And so being able to do that means we need to be still, mindfully present, kind of checking in to myself, what's going on, and then I'm going to check in to what's going on in the playroom, what's going on with my client. And that's really going to help me tune in to my clients in the playroom. So then I can use that information to pick up on emotions, recognize subtle behaviors, understand statements that are made in the session. And then I'm going to decide how I'm going to maintain that congruence, what's going on with that as things come up in the playroom. And so tapping into my resonance circuits, or for you tapping into your resonance circuits and using that congruence to align with your clients to demonstrate that unconditional positive regard and empathy, really, in my opinion, is the secret sauce to play therapy and being effective. To do that, though, you really need to have that really good self-awareness so you can figure out what's going on in the playroom. So that's it for today. Let me just do a quick recap of what we talked about today. Congruence in the play therapy space really does provide that free and protected space where children can experience unconditional positive regard and empathy to anchor them through that play therapy process through the therapeutic use of self. And that's really what's going to help to facilitate that healing process. And it really is it's important to keep in mind what your theoretical model is so that you use you show up with your therapeutic use of self, developing that therapeutic relationship within the context of your specific play therapy model. And what we know, though, is that neuroscience also provides us with a wealth of information that's going to help us use the therapeutic aspects of that play therapy relationship to help children heal. And we know that our resonance circuits really allow us to connect mind to mind, to resonate even physiologically with our clients. When we can use that information that we access through that attunement process, by tapping into those resonance circuits to really understand what's going on in the playroom and how we need to respond, or how we are facilitating that that safety and security in the playroom, using that unconditional positive regard and empathy. And again, showing up congruently and demonstrating and authentically and demonstrating unconditional positive regard and empathy doesn't mean that we don't set limits. We do. And how you do that's going to be dependent on your theory model. And being able to stay attuned and congruent through that limit setting process is really, really an important skill to learn. And then finally, to do that effectively, though, you really need to access self-awareness. And we can tap into those resonance circuits when we're tapping in and tuning into those, then we're really taking a look at, okay, what's me? First and foremost, what is this? Is this me? What is this in me? Oh, okay, it's that. Darn it, showed up again. Let me set that aside. I'll deal with that later. Or this is my client. Oh, this is what's going on. And then you use that information based on your theoretical model to help facilitate that change process. So that is it for today. So if you're interested in Play Therapy Academy is a program that I developed to provide really maximum support to child and adolescent therapists who want to learn how to use play therapy effectively to make a real difference in the lives of children, adolescents, and families. And so to do that, what I realized is first and foremost, having that dedicated time in the group consultation meetings. We have case presentations to make sure everybody gets a chance to present and get feedback. The beauty of using a group formatted is that you not only get my 30 years of experience, you get the collective wisdom, and I call it brilliance, of the group and their knowledge and their resources. So in the comments, if you're interested and you want to schedule a free 30-minute appointment with me, a video call, so we can talk about Play Therapy Academy and how it can help you, then there'll be a link to that in the comments. There'll also be a link over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com. If you click on the course, on the supervision page, you can see a little bit more about that. Because in addition to the group meetings where you get some dedicated time to learn from others, to learn from me, to talk about your cases, to learn from other people's cases of what they're working on, you also have access to some online courses. So the group meetings are online, and the courses are also online, and they're self-paced, so you can take them when it is convenient for you. They're courses that are going to help you get grounded in some really fundamental, critical skills using play therapy. And then in addition to that, we have a group chat that's private to have support in between sessions. And there's some other bonuses. The idea is to maximize the kind of support that you can have in order to get real results for your clients in the play therapy process. So that is it for today. You will find the links in the comments. Feel free to reach out to me On Instagram, you can click the link in my bio and hop over to my resources that way. You can message me on Facebook group or my LinkedIn channel or Instagram or even YouTube. Feel free to message me. Feel free to hop over to my website and check those out. And I will see you next week. Bye for now.